The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
Two of our acutest challenges are the pandemic and inflation, and the nearest future of our country, society, and economy highly depend on the steps we take to address these problems. The chief of the Budget and Finance Committee, Irakli Kovzanadze, stated at the sitting of the committee during the discussion of the revised draft state budget 2022, "I see the grave inflation since December. I keep speaking about this threat and the risk of increased prices given my forecasts. Today, this forecast has become a reality with the extremely increased prices and the burden on the population and economy," he stated, and called on the respective structures for better coordination. The monetary authorities needed to make rigid and timely decisions to mitigate and suppress inflation, he added.
Georgian Civil Aviation Agency reports that Tbilisi International Airport has served more than 1 million passengers in 9 months of 2021. According to the agency, Tbilisi International Airport served half the passengers in the same period of 2020 and up to 3 million in the same period of 2019. This means that the passenger traffic has increased more than 110% compared to the last year and is still down by more than 60% compared to 2019 levels. Taking this into account, passenger traffic has recovered by 38% at Tbilisi International Airport in 9 months of 2021 compared to the same period of 2019, the agency says.
Company Charozi, producer of Georgian traditions, delights and various dried fruits, has exported its products to Japan. Elena Gishiashvili, the founder of Charozi, told BM.G. According to her, the company so far is selling its product in Ukraine, Russia and France, while Japan is a new export market for the brand that appeared on the market a year and a half ago. The company combines production in Emirati and Russia as well as its branded store. A total of 70,000 was invested in the enterprise, of which 26,500 was financed by the Bank of Georgia. At this stage, Charozi employs 7 people.
Georgian product Renaissance, a hazelnut and pecan nut processing company, processed 20 tons of pecans this year, of which 6 tons were exported to Poland in vacuum packaging and some were sold locally. As Baya Salukvadze, co-founder of Georgian product Renaissance, tells us, the product will be sold in Polish markets. According to her, the company added the pecan processing line for the first time this year. The company plans to enter Europe and Asian countries for the next season.
You are watching The Checkpoints with Elena Kwanjilashvili and myself, I'm David Jalagonier. We are here in studio to tell you more about business and economics.
Sunday evening, and we are ready to start. The Checkpoints had the chance to ask questions to the regional director of the South Caucasus, Sebastian Molinius, who appeared at the meeting held by the Reformator, the project which is implemented by ISET Policy Institute and supported by USAID Economic Governance Program, aiming to generate reform progress analysis for policy making and public dialogue, and thereby promote informed debate about reform priorities and policy decisions, improve accountability and help build trust between the government, the private sector and the general public. The 2 reforms that will be under the radar of the Reformator for the coming time are capital markets development and regulation of insolvency. Here is Mr. Molinius' take on the overall pace of reforms in Georgia.
As we know, Georgia has always been a leader in reforms and a global leader in reforms. Very unfortunately, I think the last year or so, the government has been a bit distracted, and I think now is the opportunity to relaunch again the reform process that has made Georgia so famous globally and has managed to attract investors and help the economy grow and thus help lift people out of poverty.
One of the reforms under the agenda of this, and should we say on every government's agenda is the education reform. The World Bank is actively involved in supporting Georgia's government in many directions to boost the effectiveness of the system and gain a more skilled workforce that will be more suitable for the market demands. Here's what Sebastian Milenius has to say on the issue.
Right now, we are in the process of, in fact, engaging on what I believe to be a transformational project for the human capital agenda here in Georgia. We are looking at reforms to the health sector, social protection sector, but also to the education sector as well. When it comes to the education sector, we can look at PISA and other current rankings, and we see that there is quite a room for improvement within Georgia. I think a lot of progress has been made, but we all know that more needs to be done. And the reason why I'm so excited about this project and government's willingness to really invest and to ensure that we do something transformational for the education sector is that it will help overcome the middle income trap that Georgia potentially finds itself in, and to ensure that we have a sustained growth model for Georgia to eventually one day join the European Union. However, it will require some tough measures. It will require reforms to the early childhood development, looking at financing across and how that financing model is currently implemented, and then also looking at things like entrance requirements into universities, curriculum reform, the implementation of such reforms as well. So it's a complicated agenda, one that requires a bit of time, but nonetheless I'm confident that jointly with government that we will be able to implement sustained reforms to the education sector here in Georgia.
On the side of specific reforms, let's then mention one more reform as well, David, and that's capital markets reform, which is also taking a while to take off. But what we hear from Sebastian Milenius is that some specific steps should be taken in this direction in the near future. We can now listen to this comment as well.
I think the capital market reform process is an important reform process. Having domestic local currency markets, I think, are critical to channel savings and to be able to also create a match between long-term assets and liabilities in this country as well. Just take infrastructure as one example. I think we require long-term financing, making sure that we have some domestic resources and to be able to do so, I think, is a great opportunity, and hence the importance of creating these local capital markets. With that said, they're incredibly complex to do. It requires coordination and cooperation across a number of ministries, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy, the National Bank, and indeed many of the development partners as well. That process is ongoing, and I'm confident that in the next year or two, we will see the development of the capital markets here in Georgia.
Since we are talking about the reforms, let us talk about the electricity sector as well before we turn to one more interesting point from Sebastian Milenius.
Fully agree, David. The business sector in Georgia is thought to benefit from variable prices on electricity starting from January the 1st, 2022. One reason for that is the launch of the Georgian energy stock market. However, this is not the only reason to dig deeper why this new platform is important for the energy field of our country.
There is a list of power plants which are expected to sell electricity on the open market within the framework of energy sector. For full operation of the energy exchange was planned for July 1st of this year, but delayed until January 2022. Full market liberalization is expected in the next 5 years. All these perspectives we have already discussed with the chief of the Georgian Energy Exchange, Irina Milorava. Take a look.
Thank you for your time. It should be noted that there is a huge interest towards the Georgian energy exchange system. What can we say today whether electricity will be traded on energy exchange from January 1st or not?
We started the testing process in April, and we have been doing one trading session every month. Of course, there were difficulties in the beginning, including technical ones. The main challenge of this model is the hourly trade system in electricity. electricity. We used to do it every month before, but now it all comes a very dynamic process, and already from October we have started testing hourly trading on a daily basis. For example, today the trade was on, the auction was closed, the price was set, and practically the whole process has already been tested. So I can confidently say that we are ready for the 1st of January to launch our exchange system, but we will use the remaining time to communicate with market participants.
Do I have final confirmation from all participants of the trading systems that they are ready as well?
Of course, we cannot get such kind of confirmation. We have to evaluate it by ourselves. We already had a presentation with the balancing market operator, and we summarized the results of the 3 weeks trade process, noting what type of errors were figured out and what still needs to be corrected, and so on. Such analytical meetings are held from time to time. A large portion of the participants are already involved in the stock market. There are two types of participants: one who are obliged by the concept of a government-approved model to trade on the stock exchange, and those who have to decide for themselves whether to trade on the stock exchange or not. We have about 70 registered participants, and 50 of them are stably traded on the market.
To summarize, which power plants will sell electricity in the open market?
There are state-owned power plants, including the Enguri, Vardnili and thermal power plants. The second group is the private power plants, which are guaranteed by the purchase agreements, and the electricity market operator represents their electricity on the exchange. Besides, there are also so-called power plants with tariffs.
Will imported electricity be sold on this exchange?
According to the regulation, they can trade on the stock exchange, and also they can sell electricity under agreements. So it is up to them. However, if any kind of restrictions are imposed, it should be reflected on both the stock exchange and the balancing market operator.
When it comes to pricing, I have a question. What did the test trading show? For example, how much does the electricity cost for Georgian Railway or the Rustavi metallurgical plant in the exchange system?
Everyone has this question. Investors often ask if we can share test trading prices, but all of our consultants tell us not to share it under any circumstances, because this is a test trade where market participants do not fully disclose their trading strategies. If we look at the prices of the last week, they are radically different every day.
What do you think? Does the Georgian energy exchange system apply to the investors' appetite? Maybe that's not the right word, but it might show all the vision and requirements coming from the investors before they decide whether to go into the country or not.
We have a lot of meetings, and one of the most exciting is meeting with new investors. They have some fears about this market, which is absolutely natural and understandable. For example, the fact that the price that will be formed in the market may not be sufficient to repay their investment. This applies to those who do not have a guaranteed purchase agreement, and also to the new investors. We try to explain to them that one is the market price and the other is the price support mechanism. It is the experience of all European developed markets that only the market, especially when we are talking about a young market, cannot bring investors to the country, because at least for some time they will observe how liquid the market is, how well it works, whether prices are formed correctly or not. In order to attract an investor, we should not try to artificially raise the market price. We should offer them the price support mechanisms. Therefore, we already have rules on how to encourage renewable energy sources. This is a price premium mechanism. I have often heard that this price premium, which is set at 1.5 cents and the upper limit is 5.5 cents, is not enough. In fact, this will appear after the market prices are formed, and I do not rule out changing these limits to give them more support mechanisms.
I should also ask about the importance of building power plants in Georgia, and in this regard we should mention all the difficulties around Namakvani power plant. What do you think? Why did the process come to the point that the investor made an announcement about terminating the contract with the Georgian government?
I do not know these processes in detail, but the fact that the investor is leaving the country is a simple answer to the question for me. We have not done everything to solve the problems connected with this project. When I was asked what we should do, my opinion was that it was necessary to talk more and more about the importance of generation facilities for this country. Namakhvani is not just a commercial project. This is a step towards the energy independence of this country.
Good luck, thanks for the interview, and at the end of the year we'll probably have a meeting again when we summarize the working process before the Georgian Energy Exchange starts functioning.
Back to where we took off, one more interesting take that we heard from the World Bank Regional Director was his take on green passports and the new regulations in general that have been introduced by the Coordination Council this week.
Yes, the green passes are to be enacted from December 1st this year. What the health minister has said on the issue is that facilities such as restaurants, entertainment facilities, cinemas, opera houses, museums, concert halls will require such a path. The list excludes malls, supermarkets, and only visitors and not employees of the stated facilities will be required to have a green pass.
The health minister believes that these measures will have immediate positive results. For example, the decrease in mortality rate is expected from December already. The reason for that is the financial incentive that the government is introducing for those pensioners who have not yet been vaccinated. To push this process, the government offers 200 lari above the pension for those who will get their jabs. Let's listen to Sebastian Molinius on this and other aspects of new COVID measures.
I want to really stress that the World Bank has been a strong partner to the government of Georgia and to the people of Georgia in terms of procuring the needed medicines, medical equipment, personal protective equipment to keep people safe. Number one. Number two, we have helped the government with the procurement and the financing of vaccines. They are abundantly available here in Georgia now. Number three, and now to your question, what needs to happen is we need to get people vaccinated. I believe that the measures that were recently introduced by the Coordinating Council are appropriate. So I am a big supporter of the green passes to provide a strong incentive, in particular for the young people, to get vaccinated so that they can go out into daily public life, go into bars, into gyms, social events, but doing so in a safe manner and keeping others safe as well. I am also in favor of the financial incentive for the elderly. Right now, the proportion of people 70 above who are getting or have been vaccinated is incredibly low. And as a result, we see the many deaths that are currently taking place here in Georgia. We must all work together, and I mean everyone. This is government, the public sector, and the people of Georgia themselves to get everyone vaccinated. Vaccines are safe, they are effective, and we have now had billions of people across the world that have been vaccinated safely without any side effects. Please, it is time now for people to take personal responsibility and get vaccinated.
Since we are talking about the health sector, the Prime Minister of Georgia announced that prices on medication are greatly increased and the government is obliged to address this issue in a timely manner. This process has been evolving for years already and requires the right intervention from our side. In a real sense, we should do what European states are doing. We are not inventing anything. This issue should be regulated properly as our population is very concerned about it, stated the Prime Minister of Georgia.
This remark comes after the competition agency has finished its study of the pharmaceutical market. Irakli Lekvina, the head of the competition agency, declared in April that he would publish a highly qualified analysis by the end of the year to the public. However, the interim report does not give a clear answer to the main question of how greedy the pharmaceutical sector is and what is the average profit margin in Georgia. However, the agency has some specific recommendations on how to increase financial accessibility of medicine for the population. I sat down with the CEO of the largest medical holding in Georgia, Georgia Healthcare Group, Nicholas Gamkralidze, for an interview on the private sector assessment of the agency's interim report. Nika, thank you for being with us and taking our questions. We saw and read the study that the competition agency released just days ago. What are some of the main findings of the study, personally to you as the representative the largest holding in Georgia.
Thank you. So yes, I saw the report. It's important report from the first point, and there are several messages which I have read and several findings. One of the most important finding is that the report kind of clearly says for me that there is no excess kind of a profitability on this market. Otherwise, it would have been mentioned. Just to disclose, we've been working with the competition agency. We have disclosed all the data to them, what was available and what was requested for past year and a half or so. Here is clearly said that basically the price inflation on the medicines in Georgia is mainly driven by the devaluation of the local currency. Otherwise, the import levels in dollar terms are kind of a flat for the last 5 years. There are several recommendations which I think are important and which will serve the main goal, which is the main goal which we have all of us, is to increase accessibility to the medicines for the population. And there are several recommendations which I think will be helpful to implement, such as promotion of the generic policies, more promotion and more awareness about the generic medicines themselves and generic substitutions, and because they have a price of them are much more accessible than for brands. And there was another recommendation about the electronic prescriptions, which our company has implemented back in 2016 even, which will also support the better accessibility. So there are some of the things which we as a largest player fully agree, and we are ready to cooperate with the government to implement them, and which will be helpful for the better accessibility. There are some of the things which I cannot see that will help the main goal.
Namely?
Again. So such as direct price regulation. But I mean, the competition agency in their report has highlighted that even price regulation, which is used by some of the countries, some of the big countries, I would say, and much more developed countries than Georgia is, so maybe less effective for the current context of Georgia, because we need to kind of look at the context of the current kind of markups, and also the current context of Georgia as a small country itself, and so the decisions are not counterproductive of the main goal to have.
There was one recommendation that suits you and your company directly, and that was the recommendation about the holding system, and it was kind of linked to the prices, because that's the overall context where the agency is discussing its findings. Is there this direct link to prices?
I don't see the direct link to the pricing, to be very frank. So again, we should each and every regulation have its cost. It has its cost burden either on the private sector or the state, so which should be paid. So whatever regulation we impose, we need to kind of look in a prism whether it serves a goal. So here today in Georgia we have a context that big pharma companies are operating through the holding systems. Whether kind of detaching them from the holding legally will help to increase accessibility, I don't think so. But we should discuss this, how we see that it will help. But I don't see that it may be helpful for the better accessibility. But I can see that it may be helpful, less helpful, because of the kind of a cost burden which the new regulation will put on the private sector. So which will at the end of the day will affect the prices on a negative.
Will be reflected.
Yeah.
Will be reflected in prices, of course. The Prime Minister said that these findings need to be open for discussion, that the process should be transparent. Are you ready for these discussions, and what will be some of the arguments that you will be putting on the table?
We are more than ready, and we will be more than happy to kind of open this discussion and be, sector itself. For us, we are a public company, so our transparency level is pretty high because of the rules that we have from the London Stock Exchange. But the sector itself should be more transparent. So, and this transparency will kind of increase the trust from the population as well as from the government. So there will be kind of a less interpretations about the excess profitability, etc., etc. So sector is pretty highly competitive right now. So there is no room for excess profitability left there. So, and these discussions, I really hope that these discussions will prove that. And again, so the recommendations which are systematic and which I think will be helpful for the main goal of the better accessibility of the population to the medicines. If the systematic changes will be serving this goal, we'll be happy to support the government to implement them.
Another recommendation or kind of a concern that is reflected in this study is that there are some kinds of deals between doctors who are prescribing the medicines and big companies that are dealing with these doctors.
So unfortunately, this kind of practices in developing countries exist. So, but when we look at the context again, so when we look at the big multinational companies, so they have a very big multinational pharma companies like Pfizer, GlaxoSmithKline, Sanofi, Aventis, they have very extremely strict policies towards such arrangements. So these kind of arrangements are mainly coming from the kind of unknown players on the market, from the Asian part of the world mainly, so which are coming to the market and want to promote their medicines, so there is a demand. So this is, I fully agree with the concern, with the kind of recommendations the competition agents have, that this kind of deals should be more restricted and there should be even more fines for that, or even not only the administrative charge or even criminal charge, because this is certainly an unethical moves, either from the one side or especially from the doctor side, who is incentivized kind of unethically.
However, you cannot find any, for example, anecdotal evidence of this in this study, especially probably because it is very hard to dig into it.
In this findings,
However,
this kind of evidences are, in my opinion, are the function of the different agencies, rather than even competition agency or the private sector.
Yeah, although we haven't seen any statistics on this either from those agencies as well, unfortunately. Would you say that these kinds of findings in these tough times also, and also considering the other regulations that are being under discussion or being imposed on this sector, is scaring investors, to be blunt?
Each and every new regulation is a concern for the investors, especially if the regulation is not serving the goal. So, but I'm happy to open the discussions for that, because there are a lot of kind of unfair rumors about the sector, which is pretty developed sector in Georgia. If you look to our kind of a regional presence, I think the pharma sector in Georgia is much more developed than in any of our neighboring countries, except maybe Turkey. So, and basically, I'm happy to open this kind of discussions for more transparency and more openness, to limit this kind of some of the kind of populism or discrimination, which is discreditation, which is coming towards the sector. So openness is always key for that, so, and we are ready for that.
But this accessibility to the medicine seems to be quite a stubborn problem, so to say, right? Even though the sector knows that the problem is there, even though the government knows the problem is there, even though the patients feel that there is this problem. So what hasn't been done yet that could be done in future to deal with this problem?
There are several tools which are helpful. Some of these tools are in this report, such again the kind of implementation of the electronic prescriptions, which will limit polypharmacy, the excess prescription.
Which has been started, but then
so it's not working.
Working.
When I'm talking about implementation, it should work. So there is also one tool which is better kind of accessibility and awareness on the generic policies, which the government and the private sector should do together, and we are happy to support this initiative. There are other tools such tool which is kind of a more involvement of the intermediaries, such as private insurance sector, who is more aware how to manage than we as individual citizens. So if you look to the spending of there are 600,000 people who are insured under the private plans in Georgia. So their spending on medicines is at least 2 times lower than people who are just walking into the pharmacies. And the reason for that is that they have a scale discounts and they know better how to manage again through generic policies, through electronic prescriptions and some other tools. So maybe including such intermediaries on a wider scale will also support the goal.
Yes, and of course, I cannot let you go not commenting on the current situation, current COVID situation in Georgia. We still see that mortality rate is still high. We see that vaccination is still stalled. But we heard some new measures coming from the Coordination Council this week, including green passports, although limited, also booster doses, accessibility of vaccination for young people, and so on and so forth. What's your take on this new package of regulations?
The expansion of the expansion of the people who can get vaccinated, I'm very happy for that. My daughter on Monday, who is 14, will be well vaccinated with her first job. Also, booster doses are also very good for the people who are kind of who been vaccinated back in spring, and they kind of can boost their immunity. On the restrictions, I was hoping that the green pass would be even more green, but unfortunately it's not, because again, I'm not sure whether it will have as it is proposed, that you will be restricted unless you are vaccinated to get into the fitness restaurant or cafe or theater, whether it will be enough incentive for people who are not vaccinated to make this decision.
What about the pension reimbursements? Because that's where the ministry says that they are looking forward for the mortality rate to start coming down starting from December.
That may be helpful. We will see. That's a direct financial incentive, pretty solid one. So I think it will be helpful. But again, what are we targeting for? So having every other month this kind of heavy waves and kind of losing so many people, or just ending the pandemic. So there are some countries in Europe which have already ended the pandemic, because they have kind of vaccinated 80% of the population. So it's the question is, what is our ambition? Mm-hmm. It will be better to lose less people, but even if we will be losing 30 persons per day instead of 50, it's still a lot. So, I think we should be more ambitious on this target.
What could be more ambitious measures? And do you think we have room and time, as the government tells us, for waiting for people to be vaccinated by themselves without any
I think that without, the people who are willing to be vaccinated, they're already vaccinated. I think there is less room now for the volunteers. So, and time came, in my opinion, to kind of bring some incentives.
Some mandatory.
Some indirect mandatory. We should not kind of come up with something new. Many democratic countries in Europe have kind of applied this kind of measures.
For targeted groups, for example.
Much more greener passport than we will have from next month, and such as kind of mandatory measures for kind of medical personnel and stuff like that. So, which will stimulate for us to get to the end of this kind of road.
Yes, and COVID fatigue is there also.
Yeah.
We are all done with it. Thank you so much for being with us and taking our questions.
Time for some more news from Georgia. The Asian Development Bank has approved a €101 million loan to build and upgrade new and exciting infrastructure in Georgia and enhance services in urban centers to boost economic opportunities and improve quality of life. The project will upgrade city centers, public spaces, parks, and public transport to improve mobility. The project will construct libraries, e-learning centers, kindergartens, sport complexes, and other community buildings. The project will also support the rehabilitation of cultural sites, historical town centers, and other tourism facilities as well. Transport systems such as the Tbilisi Metro will be upgraded to improve connectivity and boost tourism.
Deputy Minister of Finance Mirza Gelashvili can't agree that the IMF new program is delayed. We already had preliminary talks and the visit of the first mission is scheduled for the second half of this month. We will agree on the main directions and benchmarks of the program, said the Deputy Minister. The President of the National Bank made a statement a few weeks ago about the launch of a new program of the IMF. Gobagwenetadze said that against the background of political tensions in the country, the IMF program is needed. The program with the International Monetary Fund was completed in early 2021.
The first Deputy Minister of Finance, Georgi Kakauridze, declares that next year the government of Georgia will subsidize utility fees only for socially vulnerable citizens. In 2021, the government covered utility fees of certain citizens based on their level of consumption of power and gas. Electricity fees were covered for households which consumed less than 200 kilowatt hours of electricity and 200 cubic meters of natural gas per month. In general, there will be a decree in a country that will determine the future increase of utility bills for the socially vulnerable, especially when the energy exchange is launched, Kakauridze said.
GM Pharma stepped out on the International Pharmaceutical Exhibition CPHI Worldwide with the status of a leading company of Georgia's pharma sector. The exhibition was held in Milan from November 9 to 12. Company says meetings were successful and GM Pharma has come one step closer to its main goal to expand on the EU market from 2023. CPHI Worldwide is a global platform which unites thousands of pharmacologists and suppliers globally. The aim of the exhibition is to create a joint space of cooperation for the pharmaceutical business representatives, both producer and procurement companies. The aim of the company, while participating in this exhibition, was to strengthen cooperation with globally acknowledged pharmaceutical companies and explore new cooperation opportunities. GM Pharma is a 100% Georgian capital pharmaceutical company with the strategic goal to enter the EU market.
Let's proceed with business then. Let me introduce you to producer of Georgian shawls. Yes, that's made in Georgia, presented by the Checkpoints.
I am Nika Lepsaya, the founder of Liform Concrete Georgia. I'm an architect and a designer. In the process of creating a design for my customers back in 2016, I thought of an idea. We bought a wash and basin from Italy, for which I paid quite a large sum in euros. When we had already installed it, I had the idea to produce the product myself. All of these are my own creations, my designs, my shapes, my drawings, and sketches. At this stage, we're cooperating with 3 companies, directly with 1 design studio and 2 stores in the city. We're going to cooperate with other companies too. There is a demand from them. We have offers and we're negotiating both in the city and in the regions. The prices of our products range from 600 to 1,500 lari, which is in the premium class price range. We're also going to create other products that we're working on very intensively right now. These are tables for interior and exterior design as well as decorative lamps. We're considering exporting in the future. We're already negotiating with several people to be able to export our products to neighboring countries. We're going to hire other people as well as increase production because 5 or 6 people will not be able to meet the demand we think we will have next spring.
Let's look at the region then. Next year, 54.8% of Azerbaijan's expected state budget revenues in the amount of around 27 billion manats will be formed at the expense of the oil sector, report informs, referring to the draft law on the state budget for 2022. According to the document, this is around 7% and 4% more compared to the approved indicators for the current year, respectively. In the structure of non-oil revenues of the budget, around 7 billion manats will come from tax authorities, 4 billion from customs authorities, and the rest from other revenues.
Russian Gazprom began implementing a plan to restock European gas storage facilities after critics accused Moscow of holding back supplies. Europe, which receives a third of its gas supplies from Russia, has seen energy prices soaring to record highs as economies come back online after the end of pandemic lockdowns. The Moscow Times reports President Vladimir Putin in late October introduced Gazprom to increase supplies to Europe after it finished filling Russian storage facilities by November 8. Gazprom has approved and began implementing the plan for injecting gas into 5 European underground storage facilities, the company said on its Telegram channel.
The rate of unemployment in Turkey was 11.5% in September, marking a 0.3 percentage point decrease from August, the latest data released. The number of unemployed people aged 15 and over fell by 70,000 to nearly 3.8 million, the Turkish Statistical Institute said in a statement. The labor force participation rate stood at around 52%. The number of employed people in Turkey increased by 426,000 to over 29 million. According to distribution by sector, 17% of employment was in agriculture, around 22% in industry, 6% in construction, and 55% in services.
The minimum national monthly wage in Armenia will grow to $178 until 2026. Deputy Minister of Labor and Social Affairs said we're planning to take the first step in 2023. At the moment, discussions are underway with the Minister of Finance, he said, as reported by Arca News Agency. During the discussion of the state budget project, a member of the opposition alliance stated that needed to raise the minimum wage, since the current minimum wage is $142, while the minimum customer basket pushed up by inflation has reached $146.
Before we say goodbye for now, we will give you the taste of Forbes Georgia November issue, which is full of interesting insights, profiles, thought leader analysis, rankings, leaderboards, and many more. Maria Madamia will give you details.
A balance of 3 forces, more than a standard management style and a new business model conceived over the years that will become a reality in 2021. So get acquainted with the 3 forces of transformation: vision, Tinatin Rukhadze, culture, Sudantelia, execution, Natalia Gwenziashvili. Today, ACT management and a unique model of success are in the hands of these powerful people, and the power lies in unity. How is the balance distributed in the company that created the standard standards of the research industry in Georgia and is now going to conquer the peaks of management consulting. The jump from a good company to a great is the main topic of the November issue of Forbes Georgia. In addition, in the new issue of the world's leading business publication, you will read.
In the rankings, we count in detail the largest pharmacy chains and telecommunication companies operating in Georgia. You will meet the richest people in America, billionaire startups, and successful Georgian under-30s who are changing the country. By the way, open call for 30 under-30 applications have already started, so join the exclusive club. In the opinion column, Zurab Giaberashvili discusses Georgia's mortality rates. What has led to high inflation and when to expect it to decline? Find answers in the new edition of Forbes Georgia. The main measurement of the Bank of Georgia are customers and their satisfaction. Nutsa Gogilashvili, head of customer satisfaction and human capital management, talks about the issue. Another successful story and business deal master, Rusudan Maisuradze, hit the pages of the November issue, where in an interview she talks about her professional experience, the defamation case, and plans of Nona Gaprindashvili against Netflix. We are also talking about waste-generated electricity in the technology column, together with Antele Yosawa, who returned to Georgia 7 years ago with one mission, to generate electricity through waste recycling, and that's what happened. How to beat the record inflation of a decade, who pays taxes in Georgia, and who got rich with cryptos. Find answers on the main questions and get acquainted with the stories of the most successful people in Georgia and abroad. Read Forbes Georgia, a century-old guide to business and economics.
Don't forget to check out the new issue. That's all for today, but we'll be coming back to you on Sunday next week. We do more news and analysis on business economics.
Before that, take a look at BMG and Forbes.g. We keep you informed and updated till Sunday.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.